What does the word dyslexia mean to you? And what impact has it had on you or someone you love? For many of us, the word came up at school, but rarely with any real understanding of what being dyslexic actually means. Like so many labels used to describe our neurodivergent children, it's often wrapped in stigma or seen as a limitation. Today's guest is here to change that. Kate Griggs is one of the world's leading voices on dyslexic thinking. A proud dyslexic herself and mum to 2 dyslexic sons, Kate has dedicated her life to shifting the narrative and championing the strengths of dyslexic minds. She's the author of 2 best-selling books, This is Dyslexia and Extraordinary People, and the founder and CEO of the global charity Made By Dyslexia. In 2022, alongside Sir Richard Branson and Virgin, Kate helped add dyslexic thinking as both a recognised skill on LinkedIn and as a noun in the dictionary. She's created free, world-class training for schools and workplaces via Microsoft Learn and LinkedIn Learning, and her work has earned her a spot on one of LinkedIn's top voices. Kate's mission is to show the world the brilliance of dyslexic thinking. In this episode, we chat about breaking down the stigma of dyslexia, MI6 and famous faces championing dyslexia and the need the world has for dyslexic thinking, exploring how AI tools are transforming support for dyslexic people, helping better understand information, navigate work and school, and unlock their unique strengths. And the story behind Kate's charity, Made by Dyslexia, and the incredible PR stunt that put them on the map. Welcome to the podcast, Kate Griggs. Kate, welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy that we have your voice on here to talk about dyslexia. But I'd really love to start, I often, with all the episodes, just begin with a little background about you, if you're happy to just share that with our listeners.
Yeah, sure. And thank you so much for inviting me on. It's really lovely to be here and to chat about the thing I'm probably most passionate about, dyslexia and dyslexic thinking. So a little bit about me. I'm dyslexic. I have 2 dyslexic boys. I married a dyslexic person, and my whole family basically are dyslexic, my brothers, my dad. So I've grown up being immersed in the wonderful world of dyslexic thinking all of my life. And I was incredibly lucky because having had a really bad start at school where I honestly thought I was the most stupid child in Britain, and my teachers were kind of telling me I wasn't very smart and wasn't going to amount to very much. My mum and dad sent me to a new school, age 9, that picked up my dyslexia. So it gave me a reason for why I was struggling. But even more important, they really focused in on my strengths and my dyslexic thinking skills. So I've known both sides of what's wrong and what should be happening in schools. And that was a long time ago now. And then when I had my own children, my 2 boys, my elder son was so obviously dyslexic, and I could spot it from the strengths really as much as, or they were even relevant or prevalent before the challenges. So we struggled with him at school. Schools didn't really understand him. And that's why I started doing what I'm doing, which is trying to teach the world the brilliance of dyslexic thinking and making sure all these wonderful kids are being empowered in school.
I think so often it's just a lack of education as to what these neurodivergent children are actually experiencing, and we have a certain narrative that we might have heard. So growing up, dyslexia to me was a child who couldn't read or write. Now, from learning more, there's actually a lot more that goes with a dyslexic profile. Could you talk more about, because you have such a positive way of talking about the dyslexic mind, and I think it would be really helpful for parents to hear, the full profile of dyslexia and for listeners who perhaps don't know as much about dyslexia.
So dyslexic people process information differently, and that results in a pattern of challenges which are all the things that we associate with traditional learning at school. It is a difficulty learning to read, and then a difficulty learning to read quickly or absorb lots of written word quickly. It can affect maths. Anything that is sequential is not a friend of a dyslexic person. We like things that are irregular and different and big picture. And rote learning as well, all the things that we need to be able to do to pass exams as well. We're not very good at remembering lots of facts and figures and regurgitating them. So all of the things that we associate with intelligence at school are all dyslexic people's challenges. And a lot of those things can be overcome with the right support and the right help. But the flip side of dyslexia is that we have this amazing pattern of strengths, which we call Made by Dyslexia, called dyslexic thinking skills. And those skills are actually all of the soft skills or human skills that are absolutely vital to work alongside artificial intelligence. So they're things like creative thinking, imagination, interpersonal skills, emotional intelligence, complex problem solving, all of the things that we don't measure and treasure in schools. So all of those skills are absolutely vital for the world today. And as a charity, we're very much trying to help the world to reevaluate what intelligence is and really focus in on all the important skills that we need to be nurturing in our kids.
A lot of the conversations that I'm having on this podcast around education, it's becoming more and more clear that actually a lot of the changes that need to happen would actually benefit all children, and it would therefore make the children that feel different feel more included. We are not inclusive enough in the classroom, and I think that's something which is being highlighted again and again as we're talking about this. I put a question out on my social media to ask listeners about dyslexia and what that means to them and what they would like to ask, what they want covered, because I haven't experienced dyslexia directly. And funnily enough, I said to my husband, because he's often sort of said, yeah, I'm a little bit dyslexic, right? And from doing the research with you coming on, I actually spoke to his mum and I said, could you tell me what Harry means by a little bit dyslexic? And she said, yes, he did. In secondary school, he was assessed and he was then supposed to go to these extra learning sessions and he kept forgetting to go, which just pretty much sums it up. But she did say that her brother was very, very dyslexic. So it was interesting for me to put a picture together for my child as to what might be going on for them and their processing. And in the questions, it's often talking about diagnosis and assessment, because as I understand it, a lot of children, you know, if we're going to sort of the misconception that we're writing letters the wrong way round, well, often children might get their B's and D's the wrong way round, or some might struggle more with reading, but it could just be developmental and that all children develop at different stages. And there doesn't seem to be an assessment process available. And there seems to be a lot of blurring between the age that you can get diagnosed, how you go about getting assessed. Can you just talk to me and unpick that a little bit?
100% you can identify dyslexia. You can either go to an educational psychologist who will do a whole raft of tests with your child, and they can identify your child as dyslexic. A very dyslexic child, like my son Ted, my elder son, he was picked up at 5, and we could have picked that up earlier if the school had been willing to do it earlier, but in the end we had to go and do a private assessment. And I think the fact that you have to wait till 7 is not, I wouldn't agree with it, and a lot of dyslexia experts don't agree with that. You should try and assess your child as soon as they start having problems. But the problem we have is that a full dyslexia assessment is really expensive, and school budgets are tight, and there isn't enough money to assess every child. There aren't enough educational psychologists around to assess every child. So Good schools are using screeners, and those screeners, again, you can start at 5. You can do them every single year because some kids will be picked up at 5, some will be picked up later. But for parents at home who are kind of worrying that their child might be dyslexic, maybe it's in the family, or maybe they're just seeing that something's not quite right, I always say that the easiest way to find out if your child is dyslexic or not is just to look at the things that they're really good at and the things that they struggle with. And all dyslexic children will have this really spiky profile where they'll be perfectly bright and able to talk about their favorite thing like dinosaurs, but there'll be something they're really struggling with at school. And whether that is reading or whether it's remembering their times tables or learning to spell or just being able to cope with all of the things they have to remember at school. And I think I would urge any parent to just follow your instincts. And Made by Dyslexia has loads of wonderful videos that are teacher training, but also brilliant for parents too. And they feature dyslexia experts from schools in the UK and the US. Learn as much as you possibly can, and then be that champion for your child. Recognise their strengths and point out what you believe with your school.
It's hard, isn't it, as a parent being that advocate, because you might feel something really innately and you can have one very quick conversation which can almost just shut it down very, very quickly. And then we're not the experts, but I do think it's listening to your gut. It's listening to your instinct. There's something not quite right here. We need to go and find the help. And I think, the early, as you're saying, at schools, the early screening is obviously a really positive start to raising awareness for these children.
I think parents do know best, and I think you need to have the confidence as parents to know that you know best. That's what I had to go through with both of my boys, and I wish that there were all of the films and resources that are available now for me to have learnt about it back then. I had to kind of go, and I went and trained in dyslexia just to understand, because I just knew that my son was, and it came with the experience I'd had before. But honestly, parents, just trust your gut, because you know, and don't let anybody deter you.
And I was thinking that actually for your parents, it was quite forward thinking, I suppose, then, and progressive for you to have been in a school that was, so supportive and helpful to you at that time.
Yeah, well, I had a big brother who was dyslexic, and they'd had a real battle with him. He was actually a lot more dyslexic than I am. So they kind of knew the ropes, and I think my dad just was not going to have any of it when I was told that I was stupid and wasn't going to amount to much, and all the other things that come with it.
Yeah, and actually, when I was writing down some of the comments that were coming through, I was quite saddened by the amount of people. There was one girl that said, my whole childhood and early adulthood, I thought I was stupid and that my brain just doesn't work. The language around it is, well, it's just really hard to read, and it's sad. And education puts so many barriers up for a lot of these children. And it would be, I think, lovely for you to talk about maybe some of the stories that you can share of dyslexic people that you've come across, not necessarily well known. Maybe some are well known, but maybe just the day-to-day, dyslexic thinkers that you've come across to sort of help give us that picture of what the future can look like.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the one thing I would say is that almost all dyslexic people have had a bad experience at school that has made them feel stupid. And that is something we hear all of the time. And it's still happening with kids today. And it's largely because the things that we're measuring in school are all of our challenges. So if you can't do what the other kids can do, you automatically feel that you're stupid. So there's a reason why, and it's probably more prevalent in dyslexia than any other neurodiversity, because it is really school measures all the things that we're bad at. So that stupid label is something we give ourselves. But I think the most important thing you can do as a parent and as a child is really learn what your skills are, because they will take you a long way in life. So things like creative thinking. So dyslexic people have an amazing imagination. They love challenging the norms. So you find a lot of dyslexic people become entrepreneurs. In fact, 40% of entrepreneurs are dyslexic because they like to find different ways of doing things. They're normally really good at selling the story. Communicating is another dyslexic thinking skill. So all of those come together to help you to make brilliant businesses. So whether you look at Virgin or Dash Water or IKEA or Joe Malone, all these wonderful, wonderful companies that have gone on, Apple, for instance, have gone on to be famous household brands. And you get lots of young people at school who start their own businesses whilst they're still at school. I've heard some wonderful examples of kids doing all sorts of incredible things to make money with their entrepreneurial traits. The other thing that I find really, really fascinating is we work very closely with the British intelligence agency, GCHQ, and dyslexic people, dyslexic thinkers, make brilliant spies. And that's because we can spot patterns that other people can't. Dyslexics are really good at seeing the big picture. So kind of taking a helicopter view of what's of a situation, or actually thinking in a very multi-sensory way. So we'll use lots of different senses to problem solve. And an example I'll give you, and actually this particular spy features on one of my podcast, Lessons in Dyslexic Thinking. But she's a spy called Charlotte, which obviously is not her real name. And she works in GCHQ's 24/7 section. And that's a section that is open 24/7 and looks at all of the different communications that are happening around the world. So they look at emails, they look at social media, they look at TV channels, they look at WhatsApp, they look at all of the communications that are happening globally, and they spot anomalies and patterns that could be a cyber threat or a terrorist attack. And she talks about how she's able to make really quick connections between disparate things to see a pattern and spot something that needs to be flagged up. And then you also have actors, for instance. Dyslexic people tend to have really brilliant emotional intelligence, so they are very good at understanding how others are feeling and thinking and watching how they do things, but also understanding their own impact if they want to have an influence on others. I've interviewed lots of amazing actors, from Orlando Bloom to Keira Knightley, but loads of fantastic actors are dyslexic. And then we could get on to musicians, and we already know one very successful musician. But most of the Beatles were dyslexic. You have loads of the amazing DJs, just right across the board. You see lots of dyslexic people in music because, again, it's using lots of different senses to play and communicate. So there's so many wonderful areas where dyslexic people flourish using their dyslexic thinking. And that's why it's so important to, whatever those things are. I mean, my eldest son is a musician, and we spotted that in him at a very young age. He just loved music and loved performing. So we kind of enabled him to really focus in on that. And my younger son was always mad about words, ironically. A lot of big famous writers are dyslexic, and successful writers are dyslexic. And Will, my younger son, is a copywriter and does that for a profession. So they've kind of tapped into the things that they love.
So if we're going back into the classroom and thinking about the barriers that are facing dyslexic kids, what would you like to see happen, or what would you like in the classroom to help? And as I was saying earlier, not only, dyslexic kids, but actually all our children.
Well, there's two things. Firstly, for dyslexic kids, and like you say, what's good for dyslexic kids is actually good for all kids. But I think firstly, for dyslexic kids, it's about levelling the playing field. So we need to recognise that they could be brilliant writers and have lovely, amazing stories in their heads, but they're not going to be the best spellers. They're not going to be great at spelling, punctuation and grammar. So if teachers understand that and really nurture all their wonderful creativity, but don't focus too much on the things that they're struggling with, the sort of process of writing, that can be completely transformative for kids. It's the same with maths. You often get kids who are really good at conceptual maths and science, but not very good at the rote learning. So it's having teachers who understand that they shouldn't be looking at the process of learning. They should be looking at the output of what these incredible kids are capable of if we don't get stuck in the nitty-gritty of reading and writing. And I think testing in general, standardised tests are just a nightmare for dyslexic kids, but they're not good for any kids because it's actually taking our brilliant, creative young people, whether they're dyslexic, neurodivergent or neurotypical, and squashing them into a box that is very narrow, but actually now is completely outdated. There's a big research that was done, which we've included in one of our reports, where they got AI, artificial intelligence, to take standardised tests. And it is so much better at them than humans. It even aced the bar exam, which is the exam to get into law school in the US. So I think we rapidly need to change what we're teaching kids and how we're teaching them, and most importantly, how we're assessing them.
Kate, you shared a video recently. It was Keira Knightley, I think, talking about her experiences at school. And she was saying, you were saying earlier about actors, how she loved creative writing. But that, you know, it was all the grammar and the full stops. And what is it like for a dyslexic brain? Does it feel frustrating when you're trying to get things down on paper? Would you rather use the computer? What is the feeling?
I think, you know, every dyslexic person is different. I love mind mapping before I do anything. I love writing, you know, doing a mind map, looking at where everything fits together, just because I like to physically write things down and get them on paper. But I haven't really sat and handwritten anything other than the to-do list for a very long time, like most people. But I think what children do struggle with is this spelling and the punctuation and grammar and all of the sort of process around writing, which isn't really what writing's about. You can talk it into a laptop. You can use voice to text or text to speech. You can use AI to help you write things now. It's about really trying to tap into your imagination and using technology as much as you need to use it. I actually quite like typing things because I can cut and paste and move it around, but some dyslexics hate typing and just like to be able to speak to things. So I think now with technology, being able to use that in schools should be an absolute given. Some dyslexic kids love to make videos. You know, they'll make videos and turn them into PowerPoint presentations or whatever the next iteration of PowerPoint is now, because there's definitely one. So I think it's just about whatever you're passionate about, find the way that you communicate it best. That could be cooking, it could be playing music, it could be telling stories, it could be science, it could be any of those things. But now with technology and AI, anything is possible, and that's what we really need to remember.
Talking about that, I wondered what your thoughts are on Peter Carl's recent plea to government about AI and supporting dyslexic kids.
Well, AI is a complete game changer for education. It's a game changer for teachers because they can actually use AI to personalize learning. So you can almost have specialist support using AI for dyslexic kids. It's brilliant for dyslexic people because it literally removes your barriers. I, like most dyslexics, it takes me quite a long time to read things. And with AI, you can put 2 reports in, like lengthy reports I did the other day. You can put them both into AI and then ask them to compare them or say what's different, or, you know, you can completely interrogate it to give amazing in-depth insight. So I 100% support his call for AI in schools. And there are some incredible things going on around the world. We're a global charity, so we look at what's happening everywhere, and there's massive, massive leaps and progress being made. But I do think that it isn't just about that. I think that should be a given, and it will be happening in schools undoubtedly. But I do think we need to look at what we're measuring and treasuring, because if you give a dyslexic child AI to help them to get past their barriers, but then you're still testing them and doing standardized tests that are focusing on their challenges, then you're just only getting them so far. So I think there's the 2 things we need to do. And definitely AI will level the playing field, but we need to look at the game of what we're actually teaching.
When I look at what my eldest child is having to do grammar-wise at school, like thinking about her homework, I can't imagine the extra layer. It's already hard enough to understand the concept behind what they're learning about in grammar. I mean, I don't even understand it. Like, we have this joke at home that she should get daddy because I can't remember. But when I think of that, it's already so complicated. And then having that added layer, what it must do to self-esteem and confidence. And then I would imagine, if you just think, well, I can't do this and I'm no good at this and I'm stupid. And then, you become, probably not all children, but then there's that, well, they're being disruptive because they haven't been recognised or haven't been seen for the challenges that they're having. I just think that just must be incredibly tough. And again, that goes back to sort of looking at our curriculum and what our kids actually really need moving forward, which is such a huge change and adjustment that needs to be done. I mean, I just remember feeling like all their intelligence is being measured by, what colour reading book they're on, and how the awareness that they have that I'm still on, red and my friend's on purple. There feels like there's a lot to break down.
There is a huge amount to break down. I do have my own podcast called Lessons in Dyslexic Thinking, and I've spoken to some of the most amazing dyslexic people, some from the Mayor of New York to Jamie Oliver to Orlando Bloom, lots and lots of incredible people, and space scientist Maggie Adair-Pocock, for instance. And one of the questions I ask everybody is, what do you think your 7-year-old self would think about what you're doing now? And without exception, every single dyslexic person I've spoken to tears up at that point, because 7 years old is the time in your life where you're really developing your self-concept. So you start thinking, what does the world think about me? And you're aware of what people think about you. And it's the time when most dyslexic children are struggling the most, because they're either not grasping reading, or the curriculum is going up a bit and they're doing horrendous grammar things or whatever else it is they're trying to do, and they can't do it, or they're not as good as other children, and they start seeing themselves as not as smart as everybody else. And that has incredible impact on your self-esteem. But it also, the downside of it is it can lead to children having behavioural problems, because it's very tough to sit in school and actually raise your hand up and say, actually, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm not sure of the answer. So, I mean, I was the kid that sat in the back of the class, would either try and go to the loo just before it was my turn to read out loud, or I just hope that I didn't get picked on to answer questions, which I always did. So I do feel the pain of all dyslexic kids. And that's why I would say, try and learn as much as you can. Try and get your teachers to learn as much as they can as well. We've got all this amazing free training, but just find out what your kids are good at, because the more you can build them up using those skills and take those skills into school so other people can see that they're good at those things, whatever it may be.
Also what I've loved about being able to have conversations like this and with people like you is that I now feel empowered to be able to talk to my children more about what dyslexia is, because I know my daughter's very good friend at school is dyslexic, and she often would say to me, my friend is really struggling, mummy, or my friend. And now I feel like I know that I can explain more about all the positives that hopefully she can then, have awareness of as well, so that we're not bringing up another generation labelling, dyslexic as sort of one thing. So I think, the movement that you have made has just been absolutely incredible. And I'm sure so many people are just so grateful for everything you've done. I have this weird thing where when I'm researching a topic, I somehow manage to bump into somebody who is experiencing what I'm researching. So I was taking my dog Billy for a walk, and I bumped into a friend of my brother's actually with his daughter. And I was listening to your TED Talk, and they were saying, we were just talking about Taylor Swift's boyfriends, and we were laughing about the fact that I was having this kind of intellectual moment listening. And anyway, we got talking, and turns out that she is dyslexic, and she's now at university, but I was able to talk to her about what that looked like for her. And she said the one thing that sticks out in her memory from school was being the only child in the class that didn't get her pen licence.
Oh, no, not the pen licence.
And actually, it's something my kids' school have removed. But I just thought, how awful. And, she was like, I want to go back and get my pen licence. I feel like we should hand out all the pens, Kate.
I know we should. We definitely should. I mean, the pen licence, how ridiculous is that? When when we think, I know we're going to, in about 5 years' time, because I know change is already happening, and with AI, it's going to happen so fast. We're going to look back on this period and we're going to look at all these incredible neurodivergent kids who have got so many brilliant skills, and we'll be sitting there thinking, what on earth were we doing? Why are we telling them there was anything wrong with them? They're just brilliant. They just do things in a different way, and they do that bit much better than people who are not neurodiverse do. So but pen licenses, I can't believe that there are still schools doing that. It's just,
I know. Well, that would have been a while back, to be fair to her, but it was just...
there are still schools doing that.
Really, pen licence campaign incoming. I wanted to ask you about the link between dyslexia and other neurodivergence. Is there a strong link with dyslexia to ADHD?
There is a strong link. I think that often kids who are dyslexic, well, they can get wrongly labelled as having ADHD, because dyslexia does come with difficulties with some executive function. I hate that word, but things like telling the time or being organised or daydreaming. They're all things that dyslexic people do, and you would also see that in ADHD. So there definitely is an overlap. There was some research out recently, actually, that said that the overlap, it was from Amsterdam or from Holland, and they'd done a really big section of respondents or people that they researched, and they said that it was a lot less than you normally hear. So I think the most important thing is to recognise which neurodiversity you've got, because if you do have ADHD and dyslexia and autism, you still need to understand what ADHD, autism and dyslexia are, and where the strengths are and where their challenges are, and then work out what your pattern of strengths would be. So there's lots of overlap, of course.
Yeah, that reminds me, I had a chat with lovely Ben Branson, and who's talking about his ADHD and his autism and a car, and which one's driving the car. But as you say, leaning into their strengths, helping them learn through their interests. I've seen that's been absolutely crucial for my child anyway, that their special interests are so intense and so passionate about it and want to know everything about it and will learn everything about it. And actually, you've got such a great learning tool there, because that drives them to have the desire to want to learn. And so I've actually started to ask their teacher to lean into that first thing in the morning, so that when they go into the classroom, there is that on their desk rather than a piece of work which, makes them anxious before they've even begun. They've kind of got that comfort of something familiar in front of them. I did just want to say, when I was looking into dyslexia, there were lots of things I learnt, such as that it is inherited. Am I right in saying that? And is that all dyslexia?
Yeah, dyslexia it's the way that your brain works. It's the way that your brain is wired, and yes, it is hereditary. So it doesn't mean necessarily. I mean, I have. I don't think my mum was dyslexic, but I know my dad was, and both my brother and I are. My husband's dyslexic, and we have 2 dyslexic boys, but it just seems very prevalent genetically in my family. Mm-hmm. But yes, it does run in families, but it can be very different. It can show up very differently. So it's not always. I think if you have a parent who has had any form of not fitting into education, it's worth just bearing that in mind, because it may come out in your child in a very different way.
Just thinking about that then, when it came to helping your children, what approach did you and your husband take? Did any of them sort of have similar ways as both of you, or are you four completely different profiles?
I think we're four completely different profiles, particularly around the challenges. I actually think the strengths, I mean, my son, my elder son, Ted, has got very much a little bit of me and a little bit of Johnny, my husband, and more from the strengths profile than anything else. He's very, very dyslexic. So he really struggled with the kind of traditional learning at school. He doesn't do sequential. He's all, I see the big picture. I'm taking in all my imagination and everything else and sort of putting it all together. So he really didn't get school. I think Will's probably a bit more like me than in terms of his strengths and challenges. But yeah, we're all different.
Did your children find having extra time in exams helpful, or did it make them feel different to their peers? How did that work?
They found it really helpful. But they were at a very good school that kind of got the fact that a lot of children actually need extra time. So it wasn't a stigma. So they just thought, we'll have the extra time because it'll help us to, it'll take me a bit longer to read things. So I need that longer time to process the question and work out how to answer it. So they were okay with it. But I know for a lot of kids, they can think that there's a stigma around it, but that's one thing we really need to remove, because it can be the difference between failing and being an A grade student or top scoring student. So it's really important. Extra time is really important.
And what about learning breaks?
I think learning breaks are good for everybody. I mean, we can't concentrate for that long. I mean, I know I need to get up and move around and make a cup of tea or just go and have fresh air. So, and I think particularly if you have a child with attention that struggles with attention, ADHD, or even just struggles with attention, just moving around and changing focus and coming back in is really good to do.
And did your boys, did they have any sort of emotional dysregulation, do you think, as a result of what they were having to manage in school?
I think the main emotional impact on kids with dyslexia is self-esteem. I mean, it isn't a behavioural issue. It isn't a social and emotional issue. It is a learning difference, but that can impact hugely on self-esteem, which can definitely impact on anxiety. And I saw that in Ted at a very young age, which is why I'm so passionate about doing what I'm doing, because he really struggled with his self-esteem, and he went from being a really happy, creative little lad to being incredibly unhappy, and I was really worried about him. So I think the impact that making these kids feel different and not understanding and not being able to explain to them why they're different and why they should be celebrating it, as well as understanding their struggles, is really important for parents and teachers to do, and their peers as well.
There was a really emotional, beautiful moment in your TED Talk where you showed a picture, was it of Ted in his superhero outfit?
Yes.
Before he started school, and you were explaining about how you had this little boy, and then it just started to disappear. I found that very moving.
And there are parents all around the world experiencing that right now with their kids and feeling really, it still makes me choke up now, feeling really hopeless, because you can see that your child is really struggling with their own self-worth, and it's tough. It's really, really tough. So that's why I would say to any parent, just learn as much as you can and make sure you put that positivity back in, because that's how we turned Ted around in the end.
How could parents use your resources to help them?
Well, everything that we do from all of our training courses are all video based. So you can, there's 3 different ways you can access them. You can go onto Made by Dyslexia's YouTube, and there's lots and lots of teacher training stuff, but there's also some brilliant campaign films that we've made. You can find the podcast that we've done. Every film we make is on our YouTube channel. We've just launched the Dyslexic U, the University of Dyslexic Thinking, which is in partnership with Open University. And we have a brilliant course for teachers and parents on there called Empowering Dyslexic Thinking at School. So that will tell you all about dyslexic thinking skills, how you can spot them and how you can support them. We also have some courses for dyslexic people, but they're great for anybody to learn about dyslexic thinking. We have one on entrepreneurs and one on change makers, and we have incredible people featuring in them, like Erin Brockovich in the change makers, or we have Richard Branson, for instance, in the entrepreneurs. But those are really good to learn about that. And then we have on Microsoft Learn, we've partnered with Microsoft. On Microsoft Learn, we have a whole day's worth of films, training films for teachers and for parents. And there's a lot that you can just skim through and watch all of the films. And then we also have stuff for the workplace too. We have a free course with LinkedIn Learning, because LinkedIn actually have made dyslexic thinking a skill because they recognize how valuable it is. And there is a course for the workplace on there as well. So, and as I say, everything we do is video based because that's just the way dyslexics like to learn. And then I also have a children's book called Extraordinary People, which goes through all of the different archetypes in kids. And that's a brilliant book for parents and dyslexic kids to read together. And then I also have an adult's book called This is Dyslexia. They're all on Penguin. So, lots and lots of things you can do to learn.
When I was looking up about dyslexia, and something I have also uncovered from my conversations with people on this podcast is all about language that we're using and terminology. And these are from like reputable sites that I have looked up online. And so, for example, one says dyslexia is a common learning difficulty. And I just think if that just said dyslexia is a common learning difference, just that simplicity of just changing that one word, how that would then make you look at dyslexia. Again, another one there's one that says 1 in 10 people in the UK has some degree of dyslexia. Dyslexia is a lifelong problem, And these are like reputable sites. I don't want to be like, get on my, horse and say who's saying this, but I just think you would never want to say it like that to a person or to your child. And it doesn't need to be said like that. And I think your mission is so strong and so clear in how we are changing dyslexic thinking. And dyslexic thinking now is a term in the dictionary.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Language is such a problem. And it's something we as a charity are really working hard to change, because if you've a lifelong condition that affects your ability to learn, it's all of those sorts of things. In America, they always lean into learning disability. And just it's probably even more negative language in the US than you use here. So we've got to change that. You will not find any of that in anything that we put out. It's all about difference and thinking differently. And of course, we have to recognize these kids will be struggling at school. That's real. I've been there. We've all been there. But you have to show the positive side, and we've got to start talking about it in that way so kids understand that there's so many brilliant things that they can do and be.
I didn't even get a chance to ask you about the sperm bank, Kate.
Yes, that was cool.
That was what an amazing thing to do. Actually, can you just tell us a little bit about that? Because it is really fascinating.
So when we launched Made by Dyslexia, as a charity, our mission is to not exist, because if we can help the world to understand the brilliance of dyslexic thinking and empower it in every school, every home and every workplace, then our job is done. So we don't need to be here as a charity anymore. So when we launched back in 2017, we had an amazing ad agency who were doing all of our work for nothing. And we gave them what was probably the every ad agency creative's dream, which is, we will look at anything. You can be as out there as you want to be, but we want to be put on the map overnight. So we just want you to be as creative and as imaginative and innovative as possible. And they came back with this amazing idea, which was that the London Sperm Bank had actually said that you couldn't donate sperm if you were dyslexic because it was considered to be a neurological deficit. So they thought, why don't we take that idea and sort of turn it around to create a campaign that will really grab the attention. So we hired a shop front or a shop in Islington, and they set it up as the Dyslexic Sperm Bank. So we had posters of all these brilliant famous dyslexics in the window, and we had doctors inside in white coats and all of the things you'd sort of expect to be in a sperm bank, and a sort of catalogue that you could look through. And we put hidden cameras behind. And people came in off the street thinking, what on earth is this? It's a sperm bank. They were interviewing people on the street as well. And we just showed people's reactions, which was very shocking. We had some very, very shocking things that people said. But we also had some really fascinating things when people actually looked through and realised how many incredible people are dyslexic. And then when we launched the film, we worked very closely with Richard Branson, who's been a great supporter of mine from the start of my campaigning. And I approached Richard and said, look, this is the film that we've made. Would you support it? So he actually announced on his social media channels on April Fool's Day, the 1st of April, that he was going to be opening the world's first dyslexic sperm bank. And even Radio 4 thought that it was possibly an April Fool's. It was all, we just had the most incredible coverage. So, yeah, it was definitely a way to put us on the map. We were, from literally within a week, I was asked to speak at the Senate in America, and just all sorts of things opened up from there. So it put us on the map in no uncertain terms.
Yeah,
but it was a fun campaign.
It's incredible. It's incredible. And actually, for any of the listeners, your TED Talk and also the videos of the reactions and the sperm bank, I would highly recommend listening to. The last question that I just ask all my guests is, what would you like to see change for our neurodivergent kids?
I'd like to see the world understand difference as brilliance, to understand that just because we think differently, it doesn't make it wrong. It makes it different. And we all need difference in every single thing we do in life.
That's lovely. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you. It's been great chatting to you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Neurodivergent Kids. Please do share it with someone else who you think might need to hear it too. To find out more about Kate's incredible work, head to madebydyslexia.org, where you'll find free resources. Her books, This is Dyslexia and Extraordinary People, are also brilliant places to start. Don't forget to follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you're enjoying the series, a quick rating or review helps us reach even more parents, carers and educators. Thanks again for being part of this growing community, and I'll catch you next time on Let's Talk Neurodivergent Kids.